Let's talk about what is going on in Gaza. The UN body responsible for monitoring food security has said that Gaza City is experiencing famine. It comes as international condemnation of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government grows, both over its planned offensive in Gaza and its plan to divide the West Bank by expanding illegal settlements there. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy has indeed summoned the Israeli ambassador to criticise the West Bank developments in the strongest terms. Let's speak now to Dr. Samuel Ramani, an Associate Fellow of RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute Middle East Programme. We'll be speaking more about the situation in Gaza in the midday update, but right now I want to focus on what's happening in the West Bank. Dr. Ramani, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Tell us, what is the plan in the West Bank, and who has announced it? Because it's not an official announcement by the Israeli government. It's one of the parties that's a member of the coalition.
Exactly. Well, Netanyahu is obviously having to toe a delicate line to accommodate the preferences of the far-right coalition on many issues. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir also are slowing down some of the talks about a ceasefire and some about hostage releases. Basically, this would involve constructing thousands of new housing units, some industrial facilities, and some related infrastructure in about a 12 square kilometer area of the West Bank. It's known as E1, so that's why it's called the E1 corridor plan. And the concern is that this would have long-term repercussions if Palestine were to try to create an independent state, because it would effectively bifurcate the West Bank and also isolate East Jerusalem from the rest of it. That may be impractical from an Israeli point of view, because East Jerusalem is not seen to be ever handed over to the Palestinians. But to Palestinians who want to create a state, this is something that's very symbolically resonant and a source of deep frustration.
Absolutely. And but obviously this is just the latest in the long line of settlements that have been happening in the West Bank. I mean, something like 50% of the West Bank has already been settled by the Israelis. It must be the policy, although it's not stated explicitly, but the policy of all Israeli governments, including moderate ones before Netanyahu, to effectively annex the West Bank.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what the concern was, and that's part of the reason why you had the Abraham Accords take shape in the first place. The UAE normalized with Israel in part as a gambit to prevent the annexation of the West Bank, and then they kind of claimed victory in that respect back in 2020 when Trump brokered that deal. And it's no surprise that the far-right parties are kind of the leading promoters of this, because many of their core supporters also are Israeli settlers in the West Bank, and some of the leadership even are settlers. So that makes sense. But it's something that's been consistently a policy of pretty much all Israeli governments over the past period of time, and it's one that's likely to continue.
And the violence in the West Bank, we always talk, obviously, for very obvious reasons, about what is happening in Gaza. But every day, Palestinians are being attacked by Israeli settlers.
Yeah, well, there is a concern, obviously, that the Israeli settlers sometimes operate outside the confines of not only international law, but also Israeli law, which is why some of the most militant settlers were sanctioned by various Western countries, including the Biden administration, pushing some of those sanctions, in part because they kind of were seemingly having too loose access to guns, and then using these kind of lethal weapons to devastating effects. So we've seen problems, obviously, from the settlers kind of going overboard, like the killing of a Palestinian man in Duma, but also some raids and incursions that were carried out by Israeli forces themselves in places like Tubas and Jenin. And sometimes they involve soldiers, sometimes they involve construction machinery, sometimes they involve aerial equipment. But it's the Israeli military and also settlers who have been carrying out some kinds of attacks that sometimes have lethal impact.
Brilliant. Well, Dr. Ramani, it says in my notes that you've been sanctioned by Russia. Or was that left over from a different... Have you been sanctioned?
Oh, yeah, that did happen. Yeah, it happened.
How did you manage to get sanctioned by Russia? You're just an unassuming associate fellow of the Middle East program. What have you done to deserve this?
Well, I mean, my focus is also on Russia. So the Middle East program is one of several hats I wear at RUSI, but I've got my PhD in Russian Studies, International Relations. I wrote a couple of books, Russia and Africa, Putin's War in Ukraine. I'm a columnist for or regular contributor rather, to the Telegraph. So yeah, I do write a lot about Russia. I write a lot about the Ukraine war, and that some of my narratives, obviously, that expose its harm to international security and Ukrainian civilians have been obviously taken very negatively inside Russia. I used to travel to Russia quite regularly before 2022, but now I guess they cannot, at least as long as this current system's in power.
And how do they tell you you've been sanctioned? Do they send you an email, drop you a letter?
So basically, what happened was one of your former colleagues, Maddie, who used to work at Times Radio, now is at Sky News, gave me a call when I was disembarking from a plane from Copenhagen, basically telling me that I was on the stop list. So I went on the internet, I looked up the stop list, and I found that they had sanctioned 21 people, mostly journalists, analysts, and experts, in response to Britain cutting off the financial intermediaries that launder money for the Russian military in Central Asia, as well as also the crypto exchanges that launder money for the Russian military. So a very, very bizarre and asymmetric retaliation coming from the Russians, but it's something that happened. Yeah, and it's just a sign that Russia is cracking down on dissent, both at home, where many of their most talented intellectuals have had to flee or have gone to prison, and also abroad, where they crack down on Western and foreign critics. And it's pretty jarring that this is happening at a time when they're entertaining the prospects of peace and re-engagement. They're clearly not ready to re-engage with with the West. I think based on some of the rhetoric and also the motivations behind these kinds of counter sanctions.
Brilliant. Well, Dr. Ramani, thank you so much for coming on the show. The Professor of International Relations at Oxford and the Associate Fellow of International Security at RUSI. That was a fascinating discussion, both on Israel in the West Bank, but also one I wasn't expecting about Russian sanctions. Thank you so much.
تعال ننزل. الو وعليكم السلام. استنى علي شوي الشاشه قدامي. لا توصل. هون بينزلونا. قالت لي صار احكي لي مع الضابط. ايوه المسؤول الشيء ده. خيري. يلا نعطي متر لهون. نعطي متر لهون يلا. Where from? Where from? كلمة بحيدر شيلي بغرفتك. تعال يا أخي هون. تعال يا بيبي.